Welcome to The Drift. We have a very special guy today on our podcast. You've probably seen that guy on the front of the boat working to tag a great white. This thing was all over social media and got a lot of energy. And with us today is that guy, Greg Skomal. Greg, welcome to The Drift.
Great to be here. Great to be here, John.
All right, Greg. So I want to start out. All the work you've done has been amazing, and now you've got this one viral video clip that just kind of caught on fire. Tell me about what was going on there. Just kind of give me a setup for that clip. That was amazing stuff.
Yeah, this happened actually a couple of summers ago, and what we do is we get out there, and our goal is to videotape, identify, and tag white sharks off the coast of Cape Cod. And this particular day, we were following a white shark, although I could not see it. We used a spotter plane, and my pilot was up in the air, and he saw it, and he said, you're coming up on a shark, and the water visibility was really horrible. And what I have in my hand is a pole with a camera on it. And the first thing I do is we try to get videotape of the shark, see if we know who it is. It's got a tag, a male, a female, those kinds of things. And as I came up on the shark, I could not see it. I'm looking down. You can see in the video, I'm looking down, and out of nowhere, from below me, this shark bolts right out, comes up into the air, and makes a go at me, and it opens its mouth. And when I looked down, all I saw was looking straight down the mouth of this shark into its throat. And
now, when you say when you say make a go at you, so a guy like me, a shark that size makes a go at me once, I think I'm out of the shark business. What do you mean by make a go at you?
Well, I thought a lot about this incident, and I don't know whether, some people thought maybe we spooked the shark, but the way this shark was coming out of the water with its mouth wide open,
right,
tells me that it was clearly interpreted, and I think it was interpreting my image on the surface of the water as some kind of prey item. And so it came up out of the water in an attempt to bite. So that's what I mean by make a go at me.
Yeah.
And I was safe. I'm 4 feet above the water.
Some kind of prey item too? Yeah, not crazy about that. But how often? So in doing what you do, how often have you been some kind of prey item?
Well, it doesn't happen very often, and I'm really happy about that. My wife and family are pretty happy about that. It doesn't happen much.
So
that was the only time.
So tell me what got you interested in this business. I mean, you were growing up right around the Jaws years, so I would imagine watching that movie as a child, you were probably anybody else would say it's the last job I'd want to get into. But tell me about that.
Yeah, you mentioned Jaws. I did grow up in the 70s. I was a young teenager when Jaws came out. I saw Jaws in a movie theater. And for me, it was kind of an inspirational film. I had been drawn to the ocean, to fish in general. I thought sharks were really cool. I knew at a pretty early age that science would be something I'd want to go into. I saw the movie Jaws. I saw this character, Matt Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and I said, if I could wish for a job, that would be it. Studying big sharks, white sharks, would be the coolest job in the world. And you know what? A little elbow grease and a lot of luck. I get to do that today. So I'm pitching myself every day.
Take me quick through that elbow grease and luck. What does it take to get to doing what you do? I mean, you're one of the first to tag a great white, correct?
Yeah, certainly among the first, the only one really to be tagging with more of the sophisticated technology we're using today. There have been people before me that have tagged white sharks in the Atlantic, but the stuff that we're able to use in terms of technology has really changed dramatically in the last 2 or 3 decades.
Okay, by the way, you've probably got one of the coolest state jobs on the planet by the way. You work for the state of Massachusetts, correct?
Yeah, and the so I work for the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries, and I have been for well over 30 years. And that whole time I've been working for them, I've been doing shark research for the agency. And this white shark work we're doing is, for the Division of Marine Fisheries. Where the White Shark Conservancy comes in, it's a nonprofit that its executive director, Cynthia Wigren, started about 7 years ago. And she did it because of a conversation she and I had back then where she said, "What do you need to get your research done on white sharks?" And I said, "You know what I need is I need a nonprofit to help support that research because I didn't have a lot of funding coming from the state." And that's exactly what the Conservancy is. It's a foundation, a nonprofit that basically supports research, promotes public safety, and educates the public. So the research platform that we use, the boat that we use, is all supported by the Conservancy, our spotter plane. They're basically writing checks to help support the research.
Well, that's great. I mean, and that supports the work, the state work. So you couldn't ask for a better support system.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good example of a private and public partnership that's working. And we're developing, we're producing information that's directly relevant to for education and to public safety. So it's a win-win all around.
So let's talk about the tagging of the shark. Now you call it the white shark. Just for those who don't know, so this is the great white thing, right? What's a great white and what's a white shark? And is there a difference, or is great white just a buzz? Tell me about that.
Now, the great white shark is the name that's most commonly used by the general public and the media. What scientists decided to do a whole bunch of years ago is they dropped the word great, and now it's just called the white shark, but it's the same species.
And they are protected species, correct? The white shark is protected.
Well, here in the U.S., what it is, it's prohibited from retention. So all that means is that fishermen can't go out and kill them and capture them. So it does afford them a level of protection.
Mm-hmm. Which I'm sure in your view is important. You wouldn't want these animals to be hunted in shark tournaments and the like.
Well, exactly. I think that when we look at white sharks, we're really looking at a top predator. And when you look at the ocean ecosystem in general, part of the ocean ecosystem is keeping it in balance, and that's what top predators do. So when I view white sharks, when I view other species of sharks, we really need our top predators in order to keep that ecosystem balanced.
So let's talk about what we gain from and the knowledge we gain from the tag on the shark. What do we gain by the tag? And talk a little bit about the system. So it's like, how does it work? Do you find that are you notified that a shark is in an area, and then you sort of rush out to tag it, or are you able to track sharks? And I would imagine if the shark doesn't have a tag on it yet, it's more difficult, obviously, to tag. How does that process work?
Well, we've got a kind of a really unique process for tagging sharks. In other parts of the world, scientists will typically chum the waters like crazy, draw the sharks to them. And, we're really fairly close to swimming beaches. So that's the one thing we don't want to do. We don't want to modify the behavior of the sharks. We don't want to draw them into these areas. Instead, what we do is we use a plane. We put a plane in the air, and that's our spotter pilot. His name's Wayne Davis. He's a phenomenal photographer as well. And so what he does is he'll go find the sharks. We'll decide we're going to go on the water that day, and he's going to go up in the air, and he's going to go locate a shark for us and tell us where it is. We will then steam up to it in our vessel, our tagging vessel. And if you look at our tagging vessel, it's got a very long pulpit on the end of its bow. And I walk out on that pulpit.
I've seen that pulpit somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, you walk out on it, all right.
Yeah.
I sure do.
Yeah, in many ways, I feel like I'm walking the plank.
Right.
But
Yeah, I would imagine.
uh, there's also a tower in the boat, and the captain's up in the tower, and he's able to see the shark, and then I'm
Uh-huh.
able to see the shark. And the reason I have that pulpit is we don't want the engines of the boat to spook the shark.
I
And
see.
so I'll be ahead of the boat engines, ahead of the noise. And we'll come up right next to that shark. And if that shark is shallow enough, I'm able to place the tag at the base of the dorsal fin using about a 12-foot long pole with a
Okay.
needle on the end. And what I'm doing is I'm inserting a little dart that's going to go right at the base of the dorsal fin into the muscle there. And that dart is tethered to one of the various kinds of tag technologies that we're using right now. And that could range from acoustic technology, which emits a very high frequency sound, so we're able to look at local movements
Hmm.
of the sharks. It might be a satellite tag that speaks to a satellite, sends data through a satellite. It might be a camera tag. We've been using camera tags lately to observe behavior, so we're actually putting cameras on the sharks. It's a number of different technologies that we're using now to study various aspects of the behavior of these animals.
So that's a very good point. I didn't think about that until you mentioned it. If you were to chum the water, you would the shark would then not be acting in its normal sort of environment. Or if the shark heard the boat engines, that would also sort of shift that situation. So that you want that shark to be as close to the animal's normal sort of environment as it can be when it's spotted. So then your spotter goes up. How difficult is that to find a shark? I mean, how long do you have to fly up there to find the shark? Or I mean, you obviously know where to go, but what is that process like?
Well, yeah, you make a very good point, and that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to be as least invasive as possible. In other words, we don't want to modify the behavior of the shark in any way because we're studying natural behavior. Um, and you would think that the plane would have to look all day, but one of the things we realize now off the outer Cape is that the densities of these sharks is really high, and it would not be unusual on any given day for the spotter pilot to go up and find a shark before we even leave the dock. And
Really?
so over the course of a day, we've had him put us on 20, 25 individual sharks over the course of a 6 hour period. And so finding the sharks is actually not a big deal for us. That's the easy part.
So are you the guys that alert the beaches when that happens? Every now and then you'll see some aerial photography, and I mean, if you see a shark around a beach or a populated area, do you alert those folks in that area? Maybe a harbor master or whatever. I'm sure you do.
Yeah, we have a couple of different mechanisms for doing that. If the shark is really close to a swimming beach, what we might do is call the lifeguards themselves or the harbor
Mm.
master immediately. Um, Otherwise, we use an app that we have called Sharktivity, and the Sharktivity app is one that is free to the public. It's free to public safety officials, anybody, and it allows us to post sightings in real time, so you can see
So
them pop up on your phone through the app.
So I'm going to get that before we leave on this podcast. So you've got an app for that. So if I'm at the beach or if I'm at a certain beach, if I was using Sharktivity app, I would get an alert telling me there was shark activity nearby.
Exactly. And but I think what people have to realize is it's not really shouldn't be used for public safety purposes because if you're not receiving a ping from us about a shark in that area, it doesn't mean that there's not a shark in that area.
That's a good
Um,
point because all sharks aren't tagged, obviously, right? I mean, we can't go on the
all sharks
assumption that.
aren't tagged, and we're not there. We're not out there every single day, and we might not be at the beach that you happen to want to go swimming at. But one of the things we're trying to do is integrate the Sharktivity app with other ways of getting information. Like, let's
Mhm.
say there's a plane flying overhead. He sees a shark, or a weather helicopter, or a surfer who's out there and he decides he sees a shark and he wants to post it. So
Right.
we're letting other people other ways to populate the Sharktivity app.
Sharktivity. So, what is the reason for sort of on the east coast of the United States has become a hot spot for shark activity? What's the reason for that? Is it the increase in the seal population? As we know, the hunt for seal has been protected. You can't hunt seal, and that's increased population. And right, seal makes some great eats for white shark, right?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly right. The So the seal population was driven to the brink of extinction, really a long time ago. I mean,
Hmm.
some estimates say by the end of the 17th century, we had killed all the major breeding colonies here in the U.S. In
And why
1972,
why is that? Why were we hunting seal back before 52 or whenever the protection came into play? Why did we hunt seal?
well, early on, the purpose for hunting, certainly early settlers, it was a
Hmm.
viable food resource as well as
Okay.
it provided fur, so clothing and warmth.
Right.
Um, as we got into the more modern era, we felt that the seals were competing against us, and this is in particular in reference to commercial fishing and
Hmm.
recreational fishing enterprises. Competing with seals for similar resources. So we actually had bounty programs where you could go out and kill a seal and make $5 for every seal you
Really?
killed,
I
and that
see.
helped keep the
Because
population down.
so the fishermen were concerned that the seals were eating the fish, and that was problematic. I see.
Exactly.
So now
Exactly.
here we
So,
are in 2020, and some are saying that we should sort of lift those regulations and start to hunt seal just to sort of lessen that shark activity. What are your thoughts on that?
we have to understand that the seal population, now that we've restored it or it's growing, it numbers about 500,000 in the Western North Atlantic. That's a lot of seals, and they move around throughout the entire region. So
Hmm.
if you were to kill 5 or 10,000 seals off Cape Cod, it's very likely that those spaces left open by the removal of those seals will be filled quite rapidly by other seals moving into the area. It's not a closed population where you can just remove it and solve your problem.
I see. Makes absolute sense. So that just hunting 1,000 seals is not gonna help any. The sharks are still gonna come in and do what they have to do. Look for their food, right? It's natural.
Exactly.
So what can we do to lessen the concerns and sort of improve public safety along these lines? And you've already talked, we've talked about the apps and we've talked about notifications, but what should the average person do? Certainly you go to beaches now and you see warning signs that say, there's a heavy seal population and sharks may be in the area. What can we do, or should we even be concerned? When you look at the low numbers of shark incidents in New England or in the United States for that matter, is it even that concerning?
Well, if you look at the statistics, it shouldn't even be on our radar screen, honestly.
Hmm.
But it is. There may be one person killed every 100 years by a shark, but it's still a concern, and we're not going to remove that feeling of fear that people have. And so ultimately, people want to do something. And there's no silver bullet. And that's the real problem here, John. There's no easy
Right.
solution to this.
Right.
We do it through public education. I think in the near term, at least, we have to modify our own behavior. Through research, we're trying to
Sure.
identify those areas where people might be more at risk than other areas. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. The Outer Cape, in particular, is a high risk zone. I advise people don't go out over your waist because if you get into 6 or 8 feet of water, there could be a white shark hunting a seal very close to shore there.
Right. Right.
So it will have to come with
Sure.
behavioral modification.
Well, and what doesn't help is every piece of the movies and the media and the Shark Weeks and everything else. While it's great television, it sort of sends that the other message. It doesn't send the look how very few incidents there are. It says everybody out of the water. That kind of thing. So, but very good point there. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Let's face it, Hollywood and even prominent newspapers have figured out that sharks sell.
Would you separate some fact from fiction in your view with sort of the myths around the great white or the white shark?
Yeah, I think most of the myths about sharks and white sharks in particular come from the movie Jaws, right?
Hmm.
They don't get 25 feet long. Um, they don't jump on boats and try to sink them.
Yeah.
They're not vindictive and vengeful. They're not drawn to humans as food. They don't rely on humans
Right.
to feed on them.
Right.
They don't have a taste for human flesh. These are all the myths that came out of Jaws, and people still
Thank you for
believe
all of that, by the
they
way.
exist.
I hadn't watched the original Jaws movie in about 20 years, right? And I popped that in. My wife and I popped it in and grabbed some popcorn. And I've got to tell you, that movie still scares the hell out of me. It really does. It gets you thinking, right? You're like, we were going to go to the beach tomorrow, but I think we'll hold off. But with your fact, I'm a little less concerned. But that movie was just so well done. And if not for that
Well,
movie,
yeah, I agree on that.
if not for that movie, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, right?
I think you're absolutely right. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
I
cool.
still love to watch the film. It's great. But some of the things we've learned about white sharks since the film are really quite amazing. A lot of people
Yeah.
don't realize it. I mean, it's a very long-lived animal. They live over 70 years. It's one of the oldest living fishes. Um, and they travel amazing distances. They'll go way out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. They'll dive down to depths as great as
Hmm.
3,000 feet to an amazingly broad temperature range. They can warm their body temperature. They're really quite amazing animals, and all of this is all stuff we've learned, you know, since the film came out.
And I think you talk about some of the misconception and the fright in a lot of us when it comes to sharks. I think it's all about if they didn't have the teeth in those eyes, I think we'd be better with them.
All
If they
right.
were just like maybe multicolored and had like little puppy eyes or something and small teeth, but but I got to tell you, they do look um, like they'd have you for lunch. It's a scary animal, that's for darn sure. Tell me about a couple of your favorite. So you've come to know these sharks, right? You tag them, you follow them. You've named them. Tell me about some of the more interesting ones. Tell me about in research I found Gretel, who's uh, who's one of your favorites, right? Is Gretel still around? How's Gretel doing?
Gretel is one of my favorite sharks, but one of my most frustrating sharks. Gretel is a shark that swam into a salt pond back in 2004, and it was really the first indication that white sharks were coming back to New England in bigger numbers. And she got trapped in this pond, this salt pond off of Woods Hole, Mass, on the Elizabeth Islands, not far from where we were living on the vineyard. And I spent 2 weeks with her trying to get her out of this pond, and we finally got her out. And she was the first shark I ever put one of these sophisticated tags into.
Mm-hmm.
And right after we got her out of the pond, um, the tag failed and it came off. And
Oh,
I learned very little about Gretel other than the fact she was trapped in a salt pond for 2 weeks. And we have yet to ever see her again. So, very frustrating story, but a really amazing story
now how would
to
you
tell
know
because it
her
was my first experience.
without the tag? How would you identify her? Would you know her again? Is there another way to recognize a shark that hasn't been tagged?
Yeah, what's really cool about white sharks, and not a lot of fish have this, is they've got very distinctive color patterns. And one of the reasons that I videotape every single shark, whether or not I tag it, is we can put it into our catalog,
Oh,
and we can catalog that animal because we'll know if we see it again just based on its color pattern. You
okay.
know, they fight with each other all the time. So some of them have scars that are very distinctive. Some of them are missing fins as a result of interactions with each other. But particularly where the gray top surface of the shark meets the white underbelly, there's very distinctive color patterns. And I think of them as fingerprints almost. And so if we saw Gretel again, we would know it because we got to really get a good look at her color patterns.
Do you think you'd know it from a distance? Would you be able to see it from the plane, or would you have to get right on top of her and have a good look?
No, we would really need to get up close to her. So even sharks that I know have a tag in them, I will videotape them again to see if those color patterns have changed, whether they've got any new scars, been any fights recently, things like that.
So then there was Lydia in 2013. Tell me about Lydia. She was quite fascinating.
Yeah, Lydia was really an amazing fish because what she did after we tagged her, it was the first shark we ever tagged, white shark we ever tagged off the coast of the southeastern U.S. So we were off Florida when we tagged that shark. And we put a couple different tag technologies on her. And one of the things that she did is she headed out way out into the Atlantic Ocean as far as the mid-Atlantic ridge, and crossing over the mid-Atlantic ridge, which is this oceanographic feature that basically divides the Atlantic Ocean into the eastern versus western Atlantic. And she headed toward the Azores and really passed fairly close to the Azores, which is a series of islands out there.
So she was put. Where did you first see her? Where did you first find
tagged her off of Jacksonville, Florida.
Wow.
She's one of these sharks that actually never visited Cape Cod, which is, of course, the reason why we tag sharks off the southeastern U.S. as well. You know, we want to make sure we're learning about the whole population and not just Cape Cod sharks.
Sure. So when you tag the shark, and there's a program or a website. Is there a place where the average person can go? Is there a place where you can go to track the sharks? Is there a sort of a public place, or is that kept non-public because you don't want folks sort of interacting with the animals?
No, we really don't mind posting our data. Some of it's in real time, and some of it is older data. So in other words, some of our acoustic tags, we don't get those data until after we download the receivers that are detecting those tags. So the data may be a weeks or even months old. But for some of our satellite technology, we link that with the programs immediately. So Sharktivity, for example, is that app that you can go on and you can see some of our sharks that are moving in real time. We also work closely with a group called the Animal Telemetry Network, where you can not only see the movements of sharks, but you can see the movements of whales and seals and turtles and a variety of other species. So what we found is the public really likes to engage and learn about the movements of these animals, particularly since sometimes they're passing right by their own towns, or they're moving out incredible distances that nobody knew they went to before.
Yeah, we did a podcast last year on the shark tournament out of Fairhaven, and what I was amazed at are the children that showed up, and that were just fascinated by. And there are certainly people who are against, the hunt of or the capture of any shark, but it was amazing to see the teams of biologists and how fascinated the children were, and the education that we got after just spending a day there. You were able, through the biology of these sharks, through captured sharks, you're able to find out a whole lot about hunting patterns and the like, correct?
Oh, that's absolutely true. And a lot of and I tell this to a lot of students, a lot of my early career for the division was going to shark fishing tournaments and collecting samples. A lot of what we know about the basic biology of these sharks in terms of their growth rates, their longevity, what they feed on, how their organs and tissues operate, comes from dead sharks. And I did my entire master's thesis on blue sharks that were sampled at fishing tournaments. And as a matter of fact, I used to go to the New Bedford tournament. I don't because my time is spread so thin, but I know all the
Right.
scientists that are there. And that
Yeah.
tournament used to be out on Martha's Vineyard. And yeah, there are people who are against, shark fishing events, but my argument is if they are absolutely abiding by the rules and regulations that the state and the federal government have put in place, then those sharks can be legally harvested, and we might as well, learn from them as well.
Yeah, I will say they certainly were. When I was, there were folks there, officers from marine fisheries, and it was quite amazing. The scientists and the activity at the docks when they were brought in was quite amazing. And of course, like we've said, they're not hunting white sharks. There are certain what other sharks that can be harvested that can be
Well, what
hunted.
all these tournaments are doing now is they're only allowing the harvest that of legal sharks that are edible. So all those
Okay.
sharks are being consumed, and shark is delicious. So it's thresher sharks, it's mako sharks, and it's porbeagle sharks, all very palatable animals. And I
Yeah.
and I absolutely support learning from these fish and people and kids having a chance to see these sharks, and those sharks are all consumed and they're legally harvested. You know,
hmm
and the way we set our regulations when it comes to sharks is conservation to precautionary management. So if a shark
Right.
is legally harvested, it is not going to impact the population overall.
All right. So I guess what we learned from this is, A, white sharks are pretty darn cool, and B, don't go swimming near seals if you're on Cape Cod in the summer, right? Trying to stay away from the seals. Certainly don't go out on a, uh, a wakeboard or something around seals that could get you into some trouble. And that Greg Skomal's got a love for sharks, man. Man, it
Yeah, I
started
think you
very
summed it
young.
up pretty good there, John. I think you summed it up pretty good.
Greg, I want to thank you very much for joining us on the drift. I'm hoping you'll be a regular with us, and when some activity happens in and around white sharks, we can dial you back in again. You've been it's just been very interesting for all of us.
No, it's been a great pleasure. Any way I can reach out to the public and teach them a little bit more about sharks, you've given me a great opportunity, John. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Beautiful, Greg Scoble, thank you. And
Thank you.
Sharktivity is the app, right? Sharktivity.
Sharktivity. Yep.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John.